Welcome to Spainguru's Spanish non-lucrative visa webinar. My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es, and today is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. Remember that we're going to do a presentation here, and after that, we're going to have a Q&A session. So you can ask any question related to the Spanish non-lucrative visa or taxes or moving to Spain. And you can ask those questions in the chat box in the bottom right corner of your screen. Just make sure to write the question mark at the end, so it's easy for me to see that you ask a question afterwards. If you're happy with this webinar today, please leave a review on Trustpilot. There's a top bar there, green bar at the top with a red button where you can leave a review on Trustpilot. Now, let's go with the presentation. The way I structured this webinar is a timeline before application, during the application, and after the approval, because of course, you're all gonna get approved. Before the application, we're going to go through some definitions. We're going to talk about the consulates and outsourced services, how you enter to Spain, the different immigration status like tourists and residents, some tax considerations. I think taxes is extremely important to know exactly what to expect, even before taking the decision to move to Spain. And then we're going to go through the NLV eligibility, documentation, and requirements in depth into the most important ones. Then during the application, timing and application process, some visual slides there, so you understand what comes first and what comes after. And after the approval, how you arrive to Spain, some tips. If you want to renew your NLV, what are the requirements? And if you want to stay longer, long-term residence, and even obtain the Spanish passport, what the requirements are, and potentially transitioning to work permits. Remember, the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate's requirements. A little bit about Spainguru. Our objective is facilitating relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014, so little over 10 years in the industry, and you can see we have some fantastic reviews from our users. You can use Spainguru for absolutely free. You can join the free newsletter that I send every Monday at 10:15 CET, featuring the top discussions on social media and also the most watched videos and investigation blog posts. You can watch the YouTube channel with more than 900 videos, half of them probably about the non-lucrative visa. You can read the articles, more than 1,700 articles in our blog post, and of course, join the community with an aggregated total of more than 150,000 members, where you can find a Spanish non-lucrative visa dedicated group with more than 20,000 members, the largest out there. There you have the link. But if you want to go with vetted professional services, I have personally vetted our partners that I have been recommending, most of them for several years, so they stood the test of time. You can find immigration experts that can help you with the NLV application or to design a long-term strategy for your move to Spain. You can find tax advisors, financial planners, NLV-compliant health insurances that for sure you will need to provide if you're applying for the NLV, unless you're a UK retiree, that you can use the S1 form to access Spanish public healthcare, medical certificates, sworn translation, apostille services, and many more services. Even for people who are already living in Spain, it's interesting to go and have a look. So spend some time going to Spainguru.es because I'm sure you're going to find interesting information and services, many of them with discounts that I negotiated with our partners. Now, let's go with the process itself, and let's start before the application. But first, what is the Spanish non-lucrative visa? It's a Spanish visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. It is defined by a main organic law, 4/2000, and the regulation of this law that recently changed. The new regulation is effective since May 20th, 2025. So those two, the law and the regulation, define the Spanish non-lucrative visa. Now let's talk about the consulates in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia in particular. You can find them on Spainguru.es/Spain non-lucrative visa. I have a dedicated page for every single consulate in these 4 countries, and it is very interesting that you know this information. I'm going to tell you why later on, but it's important to understand that you cannot apply for the non-lucrative visa from anywhere in the world. You can only apply from the consulate that serves the area where you are a legal resident, okay? Or potentially, if you are a dual passport holder, a consulate in the country that you hold a passport from, right? Excuse me. Why I'm saying that it's interesting to know your dedicated consulate page on Spainguru, because, and this is an example of Los Angeles, I am aggregating all the first-hand experiences from Spainguru users on each of the consulates pages on Spainguru. It is very, very important that you understand that each consulate is special. It is their own kingdom or planet. They have different requirements, interpretations, they ask for different documentation. So it is very, very important to stay on top of the newest things that happen at your specific consulate. And for this, it is interesting to read the first-hand experiences from Spainguru's community members. Now, many consulates work with an outsourced service called BLS International. Some of them use this service for the Schengen visa, some of them for the non-lucrative visa. It is important that you understand whether your consulate works with BLS International for the processing of your non-lucrative visa. In the UK, all of them do. But in the US, many do, but not all of them. For example, New York City doesn't work with BLS International for the non-lucrative visa. That's important to know. But Miami does, Los Angeles, San Francisco do. Recently, at the beginning of the year, they hired BLS for the processing of the visa. So when you find out this, in fact, you will be dealing with BLS International, if applicable. It is a huge Indian company with presence in the stock exchange in India and operations in more than 60 countries. And they don't only do the processing of visas for Spain, but also for many other countries. Now let's talk about visa requirements and immigration status in Spain. These 4 countries that I just mentioned can enter Spain, and many other countries can enter Spain without the requirement of a visa as tourists. Now, there is a limit in which you can stay as a tourist in Spain or the Schengen area. It is, you can only stay maximum 90 days within a 6-month period. It's a rolling period. Okay, some nationalities will also require a Schengen visa to enter the Schengen area. Okay, for example, the Philippines. Now, if you plan to stay longer than 90 days in any Schengen country, and we're talking about Spain too, you need to secure a temporary or long-term visa. The non-lucrative visa is a temporary visa that will grant you the right to obtain the attached residency, the non-lucrative residency. The non-lucrative visa, the visa in particularly, is the paper that goes attached to your passport that has a 90-day validity window in which you should enter Spain. But once you enter Spain, you have the requirement to obtain your residency card, your plastic card called the TIE, and then you will be a holder of the non-lucrative residency. And the visa, after those 90 days, will expire. You will be holder of the non-lucrative residency, right? It is considered to be a temporary residency because normally you will have that residency for up to 5 years. And after 5 years, you will potentially, if you apply for it, be holder of a long-term residency, which grants you permit to stay in Spain for up to 10 years. Now, the citizens from EU countries and associate countries like Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, as well as their spouses, are exempt from the non-lucrative visa, okay, or from this requirement of this type of visas, but should fulfill other conditions in order to stay in Spain if they want to stay for more than 90 days. And in this case, it's going to be much easier for them. They're going to get a residency card for up to 5 years that doesn't need prior renewals like the non-lucrative visa. They will include a work permit as well, and they have to show much less funding requirements, okay? We mentioned the Schengen area. This is important. The Schengen area is a 28 European country area, which is internally borderless. And we're going to be mentioning the Schengen area several times in this presentation, okay? Of course, Spain is part of the Schengen area. Now, let's talk about some considerations about taxes in Spain. Probably the most important thing is the tax residency in Spain. You become a tax resident in Spain and therefore must pay taxes on your global income and potentially on the net value of your assets held abroad and inside Spain. If any of the following conditions apply, if you spend over 183 days in Spain within a year, and we're talking about the tax year, it is a calendar year that starts on January 1st to December 31st. Different from the immigration year. Your immigration year is a natural year that starts when you become a resident in Spain. Okay, for example, if you enter Spain in June, you obtain your TIE card later on, they will start your TIE card in June, and your immigration year will go from June to June. So tax year and immigration year are different. They overlap, but they are different. Okay, now coming back to tax residency in Spain, the 183 days in Spain don't need to be consecutive, and it's regardless of your immigration status. For example, if you spend 10 days in Spain as a tourist, it will count towards the sum of days towards your tax residency in Spain. Okay, so if you enter as a tourist at the beginning of the year, or if you, and later on, you enter holding a non-lucrative visa, all those days will add up. Second condition is if your main economic activity or primary income source is in Spain, regardless of the time spent in the country. And the third one is the, let's say, center of interest. Is if your spouse and or minor children are residents in Spain, not even permanent, but residents in Spain, you could also be considered to be a tax resident in Spain as well. A little tax overview here, and some taxes that you need to have in mind. Income tax, with the deadline very, very soon, June 30th, with progressive rates from 19% to 47%, who vary by regions. Then there is the Form 720. You have to disclose the net value of your assets held abroad, and the deadline is March 31st. Wealth tax is a regional tax on the net value of your assets. Depending on the region where you live, you have different taxation and threshold to kick in that tax. Okay. Very important. Madrid and Andalusia are very favorable. You can consider that they don't have wealth tax. But then there is a solidarity tax on large fortunes, which is a national tax. And it works more or less the same way as the wealth tax, but it's a national tax. You cannot escape it depending on where you move. But the threshold is much higher. It kicks in at 3 million euros. Okay. Now, remember that Spain has many double taxation agreements with the USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and many more countries that avoid taxing double taxation, right? You will not pay taxes on the same item, let's say. But of course, you may pay higher taxes depending on where you are. Spanish, if you become a Spanish tax resident, for example, maybe you pay higher taxes, but you're not going to pay taxes twice on the same thing, let's say. For US passport holders, whatever taxes you pay in Spain, you will credit those towards your taxes that you need to pay in the USA, therefore not paying anything normally. There's a common asked question, and people get very, very scared about how much taxes they would pay on their income taxes. And for example, just to make a round number, if you're making 100,000 euros, a lot of people would think that since it falls into the fifth bracket of the income tax, which is 45%, if you can see there on the right, the table on the right, the fifth bracket is 45% for an income of 100,000 euros. People think, oh, I'm going to pay 45% taxes on that income. But that is not true, because the way it works, the way the progressive brackets work, is that you pay only 19% for the first 12,450 euros, then 24% for the next 7,500 euros that you make, and 30% for the next. Therefore, you will be paying an average or median, if you will, and the effective tax rate on 100K is 36%, not 45%. Okay, so here you can see for the different incomes, starting at 30,000 up to 100,000, the effective tax rates are much lower. Not low, but much lower than that 45%. But enough about taxes. If you want to know more, make sure to join my bi-weekly Spanish taxes overview webinar. The next one is on, I think, May 17th. Now, let's go through the non-lucrative visa documentation. And this is a summarized list. And then we're going to go in depth into the most important ones. First, documentation or requirement to show an address in Spain. Depending on the consulate, is going to be more or less strict. Some consulates are happy that you say that you mention the province in which you intend to move, for example, Seville or Valencia. But some other consulates are requiring a rental contract in advance or property deeds for at least 3 months or 6 months. People are going to Airbnb or using other platforms like Spotahome, Blueground, even going to Idealista, securing those rental contracts. But I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero from Stern Abogados, who said that she never shows a rental contracts to these strict consulates because it is an absolute crazy interpretation of the requirements, and she always wins. So this is something that you need to know. Of course, many people decide not to add any friction to their process, and they decide to get a rental contract, and that's fair enough, but you should know it. Second, addressing your country of residence. As we mentioned, you can only apply from the consulate that serves the area where you're a legal resident, and you will need to prove that you're a legal resident, for example, showing your driving license. Prove sufficient financial means to support yourself and or dependents without working. Have comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain, or if you're a UK retiree, you can use the S1 form instead. That will grant you access to the public healthcare system in Spain. You will have to show a clean criminal background check, a medical certificate. If you're bringing spouse and dependents, new marriage certificate, new birth certificates, only in that case. Yes, if you're applying for yourself alone or without children, you don't need to bring birth certificates. Now, you will normally have to prove that you will not engage in any work or professional activities in Spain. by writing a letter of intent. And you will also have to submit more things like photos. You will have to pay your fees. Every applicant has to pay fees, fill up forms, etc., etc. I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero and asked her the 55 top most frequent asked questions about the non-lucrative visa. And I have those 2 videos, 20 minutes videos each, that I highly recommend you watching, because she's an expert immigration lawyer who answers each one of these questions for absolutely free. So it's very interesting to watch on Spainguru's YouTube channel. Now let's go to the financial requirements 2025. You'll need to show proof of sufficient funds. How much money you need to show, and it could be savings and or regular income, so a combination of both or one of those. Well, the first and main applicant has to show for 100% of the IPREM index of 2024, because 2024 and 2025, this index stayed the same. Each dependent, including spouses, 100% of the IPREM, okay? And this translated into euros. Main applicant is 28,800 euros, and each dependent is 7,200 euros. Therefore, a couple needs to show 36,000 euros. Can be savings and or passive income, as we said, for example, pension withdrawals, rental income, dividends, and rental income. Be careful, because many consulates do not consider this as a safe passive income, and there's been some denials because of rental income. Many people have had their non-lucrative visas accepted in the past, but many consulates are not accepting this type of income because they say that your renter or your tenant may just stop paying you at any time. So they don't like this type of income in many cases. In order to prove that you have sufficient funds, you have to show bank statements and documentation from your bank, wherever you have the money, in the US, UK, Canada, Australia, etc. Some consulates will ask you for tax returns, okay? And it's also very important that many consulates will ask you for several years of tax returns or several months of bank statements. And now recently they have added more requirements about the format in which they want to receive those bank statements. For example, DC consulates, they also want a statements of the average amount of money that you had for the previous year, and so many other things that I highly recommend you checking out. You always have to be checking the different requirements, because they can change anytime and add more requirements. But essentially, the figures that say the IPREM or the monetary requirements haven't changed. It's still 28.8K for the main applicant and 7.2K for the dependents. Something to have in mind is that when you have to renew, if you have savings only, you will need to show double the amount for the renewal. If you have passive income, then you will have to calculate how much passive income you will receive for the next 2 years in order to comply with the funding requirements for the renewal. And there are regional variations, big ones, because some regions don't ask you for double the amount, but most do. And we're gonna look at a specific scenario so we can see how we calculate the funding requirements for the renewal. We have mentioned the IPREM index. There you can see each column is 1 year starting in 2004. As you can see, 2023, 2024 has stayed the same, 600 euros per month, which is 7,200 euros per year, or 100% of the IPREM, okay? And this hasn't changed. The way that IPREM is published, a new IPREM, is in the national budget, which happens once a year at the beginning of the year, but there has to be political agreement in the Congress. In the last couple of years, there was no political agreement, therefore there was not a new budget. So what they do is to automatically copy the previous year budget allocations, and the IPREM stays the same. It could happen the same in 2026, or it could probably increase if there is political agreement. Therefore, you have to plan accordingly. If the IPREM goes to 650 euros per month, then the main applicant will go to 31.2K and dependents 7.8. And if you have to renew your visas, they will apply the new IPREM that is valid at the time of your renewal. So you have to budget accordingly. $1 million question. Can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? The answer is yes, an absolute yes. You can work under the non-lucrative visa remotely for non-Spanish company. And the answer is yes, because this is a legal gray area, okay? Now, I'm not saying that when you apply for the Spanish non-lucrative visa or when you renew it, you mention that you are working or you have to plan to work or you plan to work. Actually, if you do it, it's gonna be a straight denial. If you create the slightest doubt that you are working or you will be working under a non-lucrative visa, you will get a straight denial. Absolutely, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are people who got their non-lucrative visas and are working remotely in Spain. That is happening. And it's a gray area because it is not forbidden by the law. And there is a Supreme Court ruling that actually supports this. Okay. And if you want to watch the video where Ainhoa Manero from Stanford will answer this question directly from an expert lawyer's words, you can watch the video on YouTube. Now, something important, there is the digital nomad visa. It's a recent type of residence that it is more suitable for the people who plan to work remotely in Spain. When the non-lucrative visa was created, this type of work didn't exist, or the legislators didn't consider it. But basically, it is a gray area right now. Many people are working remotely for non-Spanish companies under the non-lucrative visa. They renew. Of course, they have to comply with the non-lucrative visa renewal requirements. They have to have their passive income or their savings or combination, etc. They cannot use their active income for the renewals. They pay their private health insurance. They don't pay Social Security in Spain, and that's how they do. But basically, this is something that is happening. Okay. Of course, this is not legal advice. I'm not recommending you to do it at all. If you plan to work remotely, of course, look at the digital nomad visa. It will probably be a much better option for you. And watch my YouTube videos for more information. And supporting all this, and also the fact that consulates are very, very different among themselves, Edinburgh officially permits non-remote work, and specifically a family whose the father, I believe, was working or is working at the oil rig in Northern Sea, got their visas, non-lucrative visas, approved. This person has to go every month for a couple of weeks to work to the oil rig and then come back to Spain, and is a holder of non-lucrative visa. And also asking Ainhoa Manero as well, she has had successful cases of people with these specific works, like pilots, for example, that they live in Spain and they travel maybe once every month or every 2 months to the States, for example, and they flew with an airline and worked and then came back to Spain, and those were also successful stories. Okay, so it's something to definitely have in mind, that if you are in one of these situations, maybe it's interesting to go with legal advice, because potentially you could be eligible for the non-lucrative visa, even if you are working in one of these specific type of works. Now let's talk about the private health insurance requirements. Not every health insurance policy is eligible for the non-lucrative visa. There are conditions. Can't have co-payments. Several consulates mention specifically that it cannot have reimbursements either. No waiting periods. So you have to be covered from moment zero in which you enter Spain. You need to be covered. It has to have full coverage for any kinds of type of medicine, okay, or type of doctors. But I added an asterisk there because there are nuances because of the pre-existing conditions that you may have, and we're going to talk about that later. Normally, you will have to pay a full year in advance because the health insurance company needs these payments in order to issue a certificate of coverage, that it must be in Spanish, that you need to provide in your application of your non-lucrative visa. Okay, and in order to provide a certificate of coverage in which the company says that you will be covered for 1 year, you need to pay 1 year in advance. This is in 99% of cases. Now, I've heard as well that if you happen to have a Spanish IBAN, okay, that is a bank account in Spain, potentially health insurance companies may accept monthly payments. Okay, but for most of you will not have a bank account in Spain until you move to Spain. Let's go to the frequently asked questions. Are my medicines covered? If you're with a private health insurance, you will have to pay retail price for your medicines. What should the health insurance start date be? There is not a clear answer for this. Always ask your experienced agent or broker, and I'd say experience in the non-lucrative visa. Okay, you can find on Spainguru.es experienced exclusive agent that knows exactly how the non-lucrative visa works. Okay, but in most cases, if you plan to enter Spain, for example, on September 15th, 2025, if you start your visa in September 1st, that is correct. That is what's accepted, okay? But, of course, many companies will not, in this case, will not start your visa so many months in the future, so you need to plan accordingly for that situation. We're going to talk about that. What are there health insurances for older than 75 years of age? Yes, there are. In fact, I think DKV has one, and Adeslas has one up to 84 years of age. What if I have pre-existing conditions? And this is circling back to the full coverage condition of your health insurance. The situation is this. Depending on how serious your pre-existing condition is, first of all, the private health insurance company may decide not to cover you at all. For example, if you have had cancer in the last 5 years, cancer diagnosis, and you're in remission, maybe it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to get coverage for those 5 years. Now, if you have something, for example, less serious, like high blood pressure, stuff like that, or asthma, these kind of things, it can happen that the private health insurance company excludes those conditions from coverage, but are still able to issue a certificate of coverage in Spanish that complies with the requirements for you to obtain the non-lucrative visa. But once you move to Spain, in the event of having any issues related to those pre-existing conditions, you will not get covered by the private health insurance. You will have to pay the treatment and, of course, medicines out of pocket. The solutions to this is to access the public healthcare system that you can do after 1 year of legal residence in Spain via something called the Convenio Especial. That costs around 60 euros if you are younger than 65 and 157 euros if you're older than 65. Under the Convenio Especial, you will have access to public healthcare system that includes treatment for all your pre-existing conditions, but still you will need to pay retail price for your medicines. It is not a full access to the private healthcare system compared to, for example, if you work in Spain and you pay your social security, like it is my case, I have full access to the public healthcare system with subsidized medicines. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and the USA? Short answer is, if it's NLV compliant, yes. But the long answer, and my recommendation is, don't do it. Why? Many reasons. You will need a certificate of coverage in Spanish that probably is not going to be issued. You will need to sworn translate it. It will not have the correct wording. It could have reimbursement clauses. It could be considered to be a tourist health insurance, which is not accepted. Okay, all those things and many more could be potential friction and potential reasons for denial. And the companies that are, the companies that provide NLV compliant health insurance in Spain are affordable, cheaper, much cheaper than in the US. So my long answer is I don't recommend it. Okay, can I apply with the UK S1 form if I am a UK retiree? Yes, you can. Do I need a Spanish bank account? No, you don't need, but if you have one, potentially you could pay on a monthly basis and still get your certificate of coverage in Spanish. Can there be reimbursements? This is a gray area, but for example, you have a screenshot up there and reimbursements are mentioned, like not allowed in Houston, for example, and you can also find it in other consulates outside the US as well. So make sure that reimbursements are not in your health insurance if you want to, let's say, take less risks. Will I get a refund if I am denied? Now, it depends on every policy. You have to read the cancellation/refund clauses. And you have to read not only those clauses, but every single clause in the contract of your health insurance. If you should get explained what are the cancellation clauses in the event of a visa denial. Some cancellation clauses offer you full refunds, no question asked. Some of them are partial refunds. Some of them have conditions for refund, like, for example, that the visa was denied because of the health insurance policy and not any other reason. So it's important that you clarify that with your agent or broker, okay, or the company that you're dealing with. It's very, very important. What are the top companies? We're going to talk about them. You have Adeslas, Asisa, DKV, those are the biggest ones. ASA, Salus, Sanitas. Sanitas is also a big one. AXA, Caser, Mafre, and many more. And all these companies are the same, okay, in my opinion. In my opinion, they're the same. They're great or good, okay, in my opinion. Now, if size matters, Adeslas, it is by far the largest one, okay? If you add the third one, Asisa, and the second one, you will get the size of Adeslas. It is a huge company, okay? And another bonus data, 26% of the Spanish population has public and private healthcare as well, and combine both. And I also do have both. I will soon, I think, actually tomorrow, I will release a video about how to combine the private and public healthcare systems in Spain and how I personally did it 1 month ago. Now, someone mentioned that in Washington, D.C. website of BLS, they were selling travel health insurance, and they were confused. I'm sorry because it's a very noisy slide, but I had to also add the screenshots of the requirements of the consulate and BLS in DC saying that travel insurance will not be accepted. They want to sell you travel health insurance because maybe for the Schengen visa that applies, who knows, they want to sell you something, but travel health insurance will not be accepted, so be careful with that. Now, if you want to find, in my opinion, the best value for money private health insurance company in Spain, which is Adeslas, make sure to contact Carlos Blanco. This is an expert immigration lawyer. He knows the ins and outs of the non-lucrative visa process, okay, so he can also help you with that. But if not, only with the private health insurance, compliant health insurance for the application of the non-lucrative visa. And he has something that not many can do. He can extend the beginning of the health insurance in the future, depending on your needs. Okay, so because many people have said that most of companies, they don't let you start the health insurance policy more than 1 month in the future. Okay, and that makes it very, very stressful because you need to get your paperwork from the health insurance very, very close from your appointment. Okay, so it is something that you need to consider. Therefore, you can go to spainguru.es/health insurance and talk to Carlos. It is absolutely free to contact him. Okay, and I'm sure he's gonna give you great service. Like, for example, I screenshot this couple of I think like 15 days ago or 3 weeks ago, a couple of first-hand experiences using Carlos. And I think he's great. And that's why I have been recommending him for more than 3 years on Spainguru. Now, let's talk about medical certificate. The medical certificate has nothing to do with the health insurance policy. Okay, it involves doctors, okay, but it is a different story. First of all, it is a one-page document that has 3-month validity from the moment it is issued. So when you submit your paperwork for your visa, it has to be valid. And also it can't, like San Francisco BLS actually rejected a medical certificate that had only 1 week left of validity. But of course, that it is, in my opinion, absolutely illegal and it is outrageous. And if you had a lawyer, the lawyer will fight it till the end. But this happened, okay? But anyways, remember that it has 3 months validity. Now, in the USA and UK, you can see there a template. Most consulates will provide you with a template. Some consulates will provide you with a template that is only in English. If the template is only in English, and that's the template that you get signed by your doctor, you will also have to sworn translate it into Spanish. If the template that you use comes also in Spanish, and it's also signed, the Spanish part, by the doctor and stamped with the date and everything, then you don't have to sworn translate it. In the US, it's enough with printing it with the doctor's letterhead and make it look official. But in the UK, the doctor has to be FCDO registered. It has to be registered in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the UK because this certificate needs to be apostilled. All right. This is a big difference between the UK and many other countries. Okay, for example, in Canada, worse than in the US, it doesn't need to be apostilled, as far as I understand. Remember to use the templates provided by the consulates because the wording has to be perfect. Okay, the doctor should not modify the wording. They should not change or add to the best of my knowledge, etc., etc. No, these things could be rejections. Frequently asked questions. Sorry, before going into the frequently asked questions, let's talk about Spanish doctor. Okay, there is also the option to obtain a medical certificate issued by the Spanish doctor. If you go to spainguru.es, I can put you in contact with a Spanish doctor that issues dozens of certificates per month. Now, it has advantages and potentially one disadvantage. The advantages of the Spanish doctor is, first of all, it's fully online. Second of all, it's only in Spanish, doesn't need to be sworn translated, you save money. It doesn't have to be apostilled, you save money and time, of course. But there is a disadvantage, a potential disadvantage, not always. In the past, beginning of last year, some consulates started to have a strict interpretation of when and how those certificates were issued. Specifically, Manchester, Lisbon, and San Francisco, if I'm not wrong, but Manchester for sure, started to require that the person had to physically be in Spain at the time of issuance of the certificate, which is absolutely crazy. It's not written anywhere in any law or regulation, but this is what they started to ask. London and Edinburgh are happily accepting this certificate regardless of where you were physically at the time of issuance, for example, okay, or Miami, right? So if this is an option for you using a Spanish doctor, you can contact the Spanish doctor via Spainguru, filling the form. You will be asked which consulate you're applying from, and the doctor will tell you whether that consulate is accepting the certificates or not, in case you are not physically in Spain at the time of issuance, right? Frequently asked question, my doctor won't sign the medical certificate template. What can I do? Change your doctor, for sure. Or doctors who ask you for blood tests, etc. Try not to go with those, okay? My doctor is not FCDO registered. Is his certificate valid? This is for UK doctors. No, the doctor needs to register at the FCDO so that his signature can be legalized by an apostille. How do I know the Spanish doctor certificate is accepted at my consulate? Ask the doctor directly via Spainguru's form. And this is a table that summarizes the different doctors, USA doctor versus Canada versus UK and Spanish doctor, which is basically what I just mentioned before. But if you're rewatching this webinar, maybe you want to pause this and so you understand the differences. Also things that happen in our community, because this is something that is very, very particular at Spainguru. This is a huge and very active community for the non-lucrative visa and many other things. Someone was asked in Chicago to obtain an apostille for their medical certificate, which is absolutely incredible, absolutely exceptional, and somewhat outrageous as well. But this has happened. The way that this person solved it, they took the medical certificate, they went to a notary, got the certificate notarized, and they apostilled the notarization of the medical certificate, and that was it. But this, if you're in the US, it is extremely unlikely that this happened. I don't know why this happened. And if this person went with a lawyer, I'm sure the lawyer will fight that till the end and would be given right. Now, let's talk about the clean criminal background check, the document that usually takes the longest to obtain, except if you were married in a strange country or your children were born in strange countries. Sometimes then marriage certificates and birth certificates take even longer than the police checks. But usually you need to start with this one, okay? And it must be squeaky clean during the last 5 years. Nothing, zero, nada. In the UK, it's called the ACRO, and it will need an apostille and sworn translation into Spanish, and usually has 6 months validity. In the US, the FBI background check, which requires a federal apostille, very important, and a sworn translation to Spanish, which has usually a 6 month validity. Check with your consulate. Let's talk about the frequently asked questions. Am I still eligible with records on my background check? It depends how serious they were. If they were violence or blood or you served conviction time, probably it's a straight denial as that. If it's something less serious, like DUI or smoking pot when you, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, stuff like that, smaller things, let's say not serious, then usually there is no problem, okay? But if you're a holder of a record, like a serious record, you probably would be, I would highly recommend you to go with a lawyer, because the lawyers would know the process, so that record doesn't count. If it won't count, sometimes there's no way out, actually, right? Am I still eligible with a no live trace with the ACRO? Yes, you're eligible, but the consulates are asking for a extra report from the ACRO office, from the police, to state which is the record that is underlying the no live trace. And I expedite the background check federal apostille. Yes and no. It is not a proper state expedite service that existed prior to the COVID pandemic. Now there is no state federal apostille expedite services, but there are channelers, there are private companies that they would do it quicker for you. Spainguru has partnered with Monument Visa that has this option. I think instead of spending 4 to 6 weeks for the federal background check apostille, it takes only 2 to 3 weeks. So more or less half of the time, sometimes even less. So if you're in a rush, it's maybe interesting to consider. Go to spainguru.es. Can I notarize the background check and use a state apostille instead? No, it will be a straight denial. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? You can use a form and use wet ink and send it on an envelope to the FBI, or you can go to a post office, USPS, and ask for it electronically. They will scan your fingerprints, or you can also go to a private channeler as well, that they will also do that. What if my fingerprints are illegible? If that's your case, send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, and I will send you a couple of links to potential services that can maybe help you out. Now, let's talk about some screenshots that I made. How long is taking the ACRO? In the UK, 5 to 6 weeks. That was in April. And in Canada, they solved their problems with the apostilles. That was taking 4 to 5 months to obtain an apostille, because they recently joined the Hague Convention, and now it's only taking 10 business days. So congratulations to our Canadian friends for that. Proof of not working. A lot of people want to work until the very end. Some are pensionists, some are retired already, and this is maybe why it is commonly known as the retirement visa instead of the non-lucrative visa, because most people use this visa to retire in Spain. So the best thing you can do is to show proof of a receipt of a pension to prove that you're not going to be working. You don't need to explain anything if you're receiving a pension. Now, if you're still working, in the UK, they're much stricter than in the US. They will ask you for a P45 form, or if you're a freelancer, a letter from HMRC, an accountant stating having ceased trading and the register for self-employment. In the USA, they will ask you for a resignation letter as an employee, a termination letter from your employment, both translated and notarized. And if you're a freelancer, a notarized affidavit promising not to work. Now, frequently asked question, should I quit before I get the visa? Short answer is no, you shouldn't, right? But depending on the consulate, they can be stricter than others. I asked this to Ainhoa Manera of Stern Abogados, and she says that none of her customers quit their jobs at the moment of submitting the visa application, because this is a strict consideration or interpretation of several consulates, but it is nowhere in the law that states that you cannot be working at the time of the submission. Okay, you can watch the video on Spainguru's YouTube channel. However, if you don't want to create problems and frictions in the process, the best if you submit a P45 in the UK. And in the US, we're gonna see that in a couple of slides. Is renting out a property considered a job? Size matters. If you have 1 or 2 properties and you're renting long-term, no, it's not considered a job. But if you have 30 properties and you're renting them on Airbnb, that's a business operation. Therefore, in that case, you should appoint a property manager to make sure that you're not participating in those operations and it's not active income. Now, what happens in the middle? Well, that's a gray area. If you think that it could cause any misinterpretation of that, but take the measures that it's required. Now, many people suggest hiring a property manager, right? Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Yes, as long as you don't get paid for anything, okay? Don't get invitations, let's say, formal invitations or for lunches or get paid for transportation. Don't get paid, okay? Can I, and going back to the different experiences of people who were planning to continue to work and quit upon the visa granting. In the case of the UK, a P45 is one way, but so is a letter from your employer stating that you have resigned and will leave on a certain date, says someone in a group. But then someone else says, it looks like a bit of a potluck if they accept a letter from HR department in place of a P45 if working up to the last minute. Okay, so it is not conclusive. I have asked this many times in the different groups, and most of people said that they were forced to provide a P45. Maybe as an extra requirement after the submission, when they saw that they were going to be accepted and they saw, well, I would need a P45 to issue the visa, then people submitted. This is the situation in the UK, but some people convinced not to, just showing a letter from HR saying that they were going to resign on a certain date upon visa granting. Now, in the US, they are much more used to this situation, and many people decide to work until the very last moment. In fact, DC Consulate, just to give you an example, includes in their official requirements, if the applicant is of working age and or employed, she can add a letter of termination from the employer stating that the applicant will no longer work for the company, or even a sabbatical year acceptance letter from the employment. They're open to sabbatical years even. The termination letter must be in Spanish or include a Spanish version, etc. And Ali says at Los Angeles, the Los Angeles consulate will accept, in this case it was consulate because this was from December, but the same case, BLS today, will accept an authorized letter of intent that states your plan on quitting upon obtaining the visa before leaving for Spain. And this has been the case in the last months as well. But so that you understand more the nuanced reality of work and the non-lucrative visa. Okay, I mentioned you the Edinburgh consulate. I mentioned you the gray area working remotely once the visa is approved and for the renewals. This Venezuelan national who applied for the non-lucrative visa at the Buenos Aires consulate, from where I'm from, got the non-lucrative visa denied because this person showed activity in their LinkedIn profile. I don't know which kind of activity, but shows certain activity. This person was denied, went to court in Madrid, and the court in Madrid said that the consulate was right in denying the visa because of showing LinkedIn activity at the time of submission. So this shows you how crazy it can be by creating doubts in the consulate that potentially there is a risk of you working. And also, if you're younger, or let's say they call it the working age, if you're 20, 30, 40, if you're a young person applying for the non-lucrative visa, of course, you are still young when you are 60 and 70, but you know what I mean. You will face additional scrutiny from the official reviewing your case because it is very, very clear that the consulates don't want to have the slightest doubt of you potentially be working under a non-lucrative visa, even if it's a gray area for remote work for non-Spanish company once you have the visa granted, as per a Supreme Court ruling. Now, let's talk about marriage and birth certificates and non-married couples. Married couples need a valid and updated certificate of marriage, okay? Apostilles, and so on translated. Children will need birth certificates, apostilles, and so on translated. And those have also 6 months validity unless stated otherwise. Non-married couples can also apply, but it will depend on the consulate if they accept this couple as a couple, okay? They need to get, this couple need to prove that they're a couple, okay? And you have to make a case, a strong case or a weak case. A strong case is showing that you are legal partners. You have a paper, like an official paper saying that you have children together. A weaker case if you show joint accounts, joint rental contracts. A much weaker case if you show photos of your holidays together and stuff like that. Okay, so depending on the consulate, there is a history of being more or less open to acceptance of non-married couples, depending on the documentation that they provide. And yes, I mentioned that all this needs to be apostille and so on translated. What about adult children and ascendants? Yes, you can bring your adult children. Adult children are considered children older than 18 years old without age limit. And ascendants are your parents, right? And there are different requirements. This is a slide for it, but we're not going to go through it right now. And we've mentioned sworn translators. Who are the sworn translators? Be careful, because these are special types of translators. Okay, these translators are accredited by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and no one else. No association of translators will create or certify a sworn translator. Okay, it has to be the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They have to pass a very difficult exam to become certified. Each sworn translator has a unique registration number. Their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, including consulates and, of course, BLS offices. Okay, and when they do the sworn translations, they will stamp the translation with that unique registration number, and those numbers are public in a page of Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs with the list, public list of all the sworn translators for all the language pairs. Of course, my recommendation is to work with sworn translators that do the specific documents every day for the non-lucrative visa. And of course, you can find them on Spainguru.es, who do dozens of applications every single month. So they know exactly what you need to provide and how you need to provide it in the different consulates. So you not only have the sworn translation service, but also the knowledge from many years of this type of documentation for this type of visa. It's very important that sworn translations are done remotely and are signed with a legally valid e-signature, okay? And no physical mail is needed. You will print the sworn translation with the stamp, and that's what you submit to the consulate. Can I use any translator from the American Translation Association? And I mention this because Miami Consulate and LA Consulate mentions this association, but they have recently deleted the link, but still mention this association, and it has nothing to do with the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, so maybe a sworn translator is free to join this association. Okay, but translators from this association are not sworn translator per se. Okay, so make sure you're using a sworn translator that is, let's say, valid for sworn translation. Okay, as I said, you can find on Spainguru. Can a sworn translator work with several language pairs? No, they only work with one: Spanish English, English Spanish, or German Spanish, Spanish German, etc. How much do sworn translations cost? Normally, for the usual documents for the Spanish non-lucrative visa, is around 40 euros per page. What comes first, apostille, then sworn translation? What most people do to save money is first they obtain the original document, they scan it, they send the scan of the original document to a sworn translator, receive the sworn translation. Meanwhile, the original document, they send it to obtain the apostille, okay? And then they receive the apostille original document and receive the sworn translation, and that's what they will submit. This is what most people do. Now, there has been some cases in which some officials have rejected apostilles that were not sworn translated. Now, I mentioned before, in the process before, that the apostille is not sworn translated, okay? Some lawyers insist that not only the original document, but also the apostille of the original document needs to be also sworn translated. So in order to be on the safest side, you need to sworn translate both and submit both for your visa application, okay? But many people choose not to do so and just sworn translate the original document, also to save some money and save some time. If you work with lawyers, for example, normally they will have in-house sworn translators and they will sworn translate everything, even the bank statements, all of them, okay? Because for them, it's the same cost to sworn translate everything than not doing it, and it has been a reason for rejection sometime in the past. And this is a poll that I ran on Spainguru's non-lucrative visa Facebook group. Should I sworn translate all the bank statements? Because sometimes you have 100 pages. If you had to sworn translate all that, it would be a lot of money. Now, 77% of people have not sworn translate all the bank statements. 17% only summary pages. 3% sworn translated everything. Okay, and this is, I think, 80 votes in total, so pretty large pool of people. My bank provided statements in Spanish. For example, Chase, you have the option to provide them in Spanish. Yeah, and then Adriel got another option there that wasn't the previous ones. But you understand me that most people, almost 80%, do not sworn translate the bank statements, and they just show their statements in English. Of course, if you're showing statements in Chinese, okay, or other alphabets, like Greek, etc., I'm sure that the Spanish authorities will not understand that very clearly. Hopefully, those banks will have the option to provide those statements in English as well, at the very least. And here I have more interviews, not only to Ainhoa, but also to Sofia Mejail of CABR Solutions, also an experienced immigration lawyer, with many more tips about the Spanish non-lucrative visa. Remember that after this presentation, we're going to go through the Q&A session in which I'm going to answer all your questions, or do my best at least. And make sure to ask your questions in the chat box in the bottom right corner of your screen. You can ask your question anytime. Make sure to add the question mark at the end. And if you haven't done so yet, and you're planning to leave the webinar, make sure to leave a nice review on Trustpilot. That's the only thing I will ask you. And it will make a world of difference to me. On the top green bar of your screen, there's a red button that will redirect you to Trustpilot. And in less than 5 seconds, you can leave a review. And of course, I will be ever thankful for that. Thank you so much. And now let's continue. We're going to go through during the application. We're going to go much faster now. The application process, a few things to have in mind. All family members must apply. Consider in-person applications and/or pickup with all applicants present at the time of application and at the time of picking up the passports. Some consulates will only deal with you by mail, okay? For example, Panama. Used to be the case of San Francisco, not anymore. Some consulates use a combination or give you the option to do by mail or by in-person appointments. Used to be the case of Houston. Now they are dealing with BLS, in-person appointments. And remember, the non-lucrative visa will grant you a 90-day window to enter Spain, okay? And after that, the visa will expire. The application, and also, let's talk about some common mistakes to avoid. First, most important, not checking the specific consular requirements. And remember, there are different lists. You have the consular requirements in English, in Spanish. You have BLS requirements, if the consulate works with BLS for the non-lucrative visa. And sometimes even internal requirements that they print in paper and they post it on the door of the office. For example, today I published a first-hand experience at Houston. This person had an internal requirement list that had different and more requirements than the official ones published on the web. They used to be the case of New York City as well. They had other requirements that were not published. Okay, so if you have the option, try to access those internal requirements. One way is just to show up and see what's there. Another way is to join the Spainguru non-lucrative visa group and ask others, okay, and read the first-hand experience. Try to get in touch with all the news from your specific consulate. Then submitting wrong documents, for example, a document with a state apostille that required a federal apostille. Expired documents, okay? The police checks, the certificates, all those have validity windows. Wrong chronology, starting with the easy stuff at the beginning and leaving the hard stuff at the end. Wrong health insurance. Maybe your health insurance has reimbursement clauses and your consulate doesn't accept it, okay? Or you are, using your UK health insurance, which is a travel health insurance, okay, with co-payments, these kind of things. So say that you plan to work, or not enough proof, that not enough convincing to the officer of the consulate that you don't plan to work, okay? Even if it's perfectly your right to obtain your non-lucrative visa for 1 year, let's say sabbatical year in Spain for 1 year or two, and maybe you want to come back to work later on. But if you say this, for example, I want to stay on the non-lucrative visa for 2 years in Spain, and then I plan to go back to work, if you say this, you will be denied. And there's absolutely no rule, no law that says that you cannot say this. And it is absolutely your right to enjoy your non-lucrative visa for a while and then plan to go back to work. But you understand me that this very, very sensitive question at the moment of submission. Now, let's talk about the timing. I'm going to go through the timing right now in the few next slides. We're going to talk about what comes first and what comes after. How much in advance should I start preparing before moving to Spain? Usually US, 6 months, and in the UK a bit faster, 4 to 5 months before the intended date of moving to Spain. And this is on the limit. Actually, you should start before, okay? Decision-making decision. I have a webinar about moving to Spain, and if you want to do things well, stress-free, and start at least 1 year before, okay? But the non-lucrative visa process 6 months before, okay? Most consulates retain passports during processing. US applicants can get a second passport quite easily, let's say. And sometimes BLS in the UK will allow to keep theirs, but there have been stricter in later times. Some people have convinced BLS officers to keep their passports because they said that they needed to travel to Spain to buy a property, and they showed the conversations with the realtors, etc. And they made a strong case why they needed a passport in the UK, and sometimes BLS let them keep theirs, but it is quite exceptional, I would say. And it is extremely hard to get a second UK passport from official procedures, because they have very strict and specific conditions to get a second passport in the UK. Sometimes they will ask you to leave prepaid envelopes so that they will send you the passport back to you with the visa or not. And sometimes they will require in-person visits to submit and or pick up your passports. The process: documents preparation, it will take 2 to 3 months, maybe more. Attending an appointment on the 3rd month normally. Wait for approval, normally 2 months average, maximum 3 months, officially 90 days. If they want more documentation, they will give you a 10-day window to provide that additional documentation. For example, this person who needed to apostille a medical certificate in Chicago, they gave her only 10 days to get it. You can choose the visa start date in a 90-day window from the application date. This is not an official thing, but I read it in many places, and I cannot find where it says. But basically, when you submit your documents, you can choose to start your visa, that the authorities start your visa validity window up to 90 days in the future from your submission of your documents, okay? And from the start date of the visa, you will have a 90-day window to enter Spain. And once you enter Spain, officially, you have 30 days to obtain your TIE card or Tarjeta de Identidad Extranjero or residency card in Spain. That will be valid for 1 year, and then you will have to renew it. This person mentions a specific problem that I think mentioned before. You can ask for the visa to be valid for up to 3 months in advance. However, the difficulty I found was finding a health insurance company who will work that far out, as most only do 2. And now I'm hearing that most only do 1. The solution: use Spainguru's recommended exclusive agent who can delay the starting date in the future. That can be extremely helpful. Now, let's look at some visual slides and how things happen in this process. Imagine that you submit on date A, orange, and you can choose, in the form, in the submission form, they will ask you, when do you want to start your visa? So you decide. You decided at the end of that 3-month period, okay? Now, imagine that you submit your paperwork, you go to the appointment, you get approved, and the officer decides to put the starting date that you chose at the end of that 3-month period, okay? The starting date is on letter B. As we said, the starting date of the visa will start a 90-day validity window in which you should enter Spain. You decide to fly to Spain before that 90-day validity window ends, and that will be letter C. And once you enter Spain, you will have 30 days to get your TIE card, officially, but not in practice. We'll talk about it. Once you obtain your TIE card should have the date in which you enter Spain as a starting date, as long as it was during the validity window of your visa. And 1 year after, you need to renew your visa. But the renewal of the visa can be done starting 60 days before the expiration of your TIE card and up to 90 days after the expiration, although it is recommended to do it before it expires. Another visual slide here, how the application process looks like. And many people say that actually the appointments is what it takes longer. So people, and even lawyers, I heard, not maybe lawyers, but professional services, they will start getting the appointments even before you start getting your documentation in certain consulates. For example, it's been crazy in San Francisco lately, and somewhat in Manchester as well, and in Boston, okay? Now, the first thing you need to do, and as I said, this is not legal advice, and this is just a general way to illustrate the process. First, find your consulate. Second, check the official requirements on BLS consulates in English, Spanish, internal requirements. Third, collect the necessary documents, okay? And start with the harder ones. Usually the police checks, FBI background check, in the US, and ACRO in the UK. Then you will obtain a medical certificate that has a 3-month validity. You will apostille and sworn translate the necessary documents. Sworn translate. You will get your private health insurance or use the S1 if you're a UK pensionist. You have that option. You can also use a private health insurance, being a pensionist too. But you will save some pounds if you use the S1 form. Book an appointment with your consulate. And as I said, some people start this much earlier than all the things that I mentioned. Then you will attend your consulate appointment or BLS appointment, where applies. Then you will submit your paperwork, you will do the appointment, and you will wait for the notification of the visa resolution. That can maximum take 90 days. Sometimes it takes longer, even if it's officially over the limit. You will collect your visa, or they will send you your visa in a prepaid envelope. You will travel to Spain, you will enter Spain, you will obtain the empadronamiento. And what is the empadronamiento? It is the registration at the city hall of the city where you live, where you bring your rental contract or your property deeds and your documentation and everything, and they issue a proof of address called the empadronamiento, which you will need in 90% of cases once you try to obtain your tarjeta de identidad extranjero or residency card at the police station or foreign office by putting your fingerprints and providing this type of documentation. And this is a new slide that I added just to give you more context and more visibility on how this process looks. This is a Gantt chart where you see the time frames for different categories. The first, police check, a marriage certificate and birth certificate if applicable. If you plan to enter in Spain, start as early as February to get your police check and marriage certificate, because once you obtain it, it will have a validity period, okay, of 6 months, usually. And it has to be valid at the time of the appointment. You will sworn translate and apostille these certificates, and then you will go through the financial documents on the 3rd month. You will obtain your medical certificate a bit later because it only has a validity period of 3 months, okay? And then you will have to potentially apostille it if you use a UK doctor. You will have to sworn translate if it was only in English. You will get your health insurance, okay, close to the appointment because of this limitation that most companies have to start the policy not too much in advance, unless you use exclusive agents. And then you will also start getting the appointments. As you can see, the time frame is much longer. Most of people start trying to get the appointment at least 2 months before, okay, even earlier in hard consulates or BLS offices. And then you will attend the appointment, you will submit the documents, there will be the processing period, and once you get your visa, you will get 90 days to enter Spain. Now, timing to avoid capital gains tax or CGT on property sales. This is important. Many people plan to sell their homes before moving to Spain, but in many of the countries and states where they're from, they don't have capital gain tax. And of course, Spain has a capital gain tax that has progressive tax rates from 19% to 30%. Average people pay about 22% of capital gains tax if they're liable for it. But can you avoid it? Absolutely. Yes, you can avoid it. And the best way to avoid it is to time the sale and when you move. And you will sell your property in a different year than the year in which you become a tax resident in Spain. Of course, there are mitigation conditions and allowances. If you're older than 65 and you have lived in your main, if it was your main property and you live in it for at least 3 years, or you use all the proceeds of your sale into a reinvestment in Spain, you have deductions, you have mitigations of your CGT. But the best you can do is to just avoid it altogether by moving in a different tax year. So the first example, the first line, as we said, the tax year starts on January 1st and ends on December 31st. You sell in 2024 and you move to Spain in 2025. Or if you sell in 2025, for example, in March, you don't step your foot in Spain until July 2nd, okay? Because there's only 182 days left during that calendar year. Therefore, you wouldn't become a tax resident in that same year in which you sold your property, right? And if you want to read more about how to avoid CGT and much more about taxes, apart from joining my webinar, I have dozens of articles on Spainguru's blog posts and dozens of videos on Spainguru's YouTube channel. Now let's talk about after the approval. Living in Spain on a non-lucrative visa. First, you will have to arrive to Spain. And you have two options. Either you arrive to Spain from outside Schengen area, in which you will get a Spanish authority stamp on your passports, which is the best you can get. And hopefully they stamp your visa itself. So it's very clear that you entered that date and you started your visa validation, okay? Or you arrive to Spain from another Schengen country. For example, you fly from New York to Frankfurt, and then you fly from, in Frankfurt, you get a German authority stamp. And then when you fly from Frankfurt to Spain, you don't get any stamp because you already entered Schengen. What you do in that case, you get a declaración de entrada. It is a one-page document issued by the police station. Usually there's a police station in every airport or close to every border, okay? And those police stations are used to issue this document that states exactly which date you enter Spain. You have 72 hours to do it, but the best is that you do it immediately in a police station that is used to issue it, because many people say that they waited to obtain these documents and they went to another police station somewhere else, and this police station didn't know what they were talking about. Okay, so it's important that you do it. Some people didn't get the declaración de entrada, in case they didn't have the Spanish stamp, and showed their boarding passes, and later on when they went to their TIA appointments, everything was fine. The police officer was a nice guy and was happy to see those boarding passes, and it was okay. But some other people found a bad guy who had a bad morning and required them to get out from Schengen area and go back in to validate their visa, okay, during the visa validity period. So try to enter during the visa validity period. Do not enter as tourist before. You can do it, but it will bring unexpected consequences. Try to enter Spain during the visa validity period to activate it, okay? And get a stamp from a Spanish authority, either in your passport or via a declaración de entrada. Now, some tips for your arrival: get a Spanish SIM card to receive SMS, open a non-resident bank account. It will take weeks, if not months, to get your TIE card. So you will have to pay your rent, your utilities, and many other things. So you will need a Spanish bank. And for that, you can open a non-resident bank account in most big banks, okay? And then once you get your TIE card, you can change the status to a resident bank account, and probably it will be cheaper. 90% of cases, you will need a empadronamiento, which has only a validity period of 3 months, in order to submit it when you apply for the residency card. And as we said, you have officially 30 days to obtain your TIE card once you enter Spain. Frequently asked question: is the empadronamiento strictly necessary to obtain the TIE card? There are no appointments to obtain the TIE. What should I do? Let's talk about it. And I'm going to quote a lawyer who is very active in my groups, saying that as per the TIE appointment, in practice, it is not required to get it within 1 month. Appointments can take up to 6 months without issue. Of course, it's painful because you don't have your TIE card and your visa expires after 90 days. So the better you get your TIE card, the sooner the better, but there is no immediate rush with the authorities, let's say. Now, talking about empadronamiento, it is officially not needed for the first tarjeta de extranjero or residency card, the TIE. It is not needed, okay? But 90% of the police stations will require it. So if you don't want to have problems, try to get it as soon as possible, okay? Now, big police stations know that the empadronamiento is not officially required. What they require is a proof of address. So if you can prove your address by any other means, for example, Airbnb receipts, or even a rental contract. For example, in Malaga, a rental contract would work. As far as I know, this can change anytime, because they know that they're taking months to get empadronamiento, the people. So make sure that when you get an appointment at a specific police station, understand whether they require an empadronamiento or not if you don't have it, okay? Also remember, you can get an empadronamiento for your TIE card within the same province as well, okay? You cannot get an appointment for your TIE card in a province outside, in another province, from the one where you're living. Now, let's talk about renewal process. How and when to renew your non-lucrative visa. After year 1, you need to renew it, as we said. The renewal period starts 60 days before the expiration of your TIE card and up to 90 days after expiration. Once you will renew for 2 more years. You will renew again for 2 more years, total 5 years. Remember that the financial requirements for renewals are double the amount if you're only showing savings. And if you're showing passive income, you will have to calculate how much passive income you're going to get in a period of 2 years. That's what we will count, okay? And the funds need to be available in the account when renewing, okay? Does it have to be an account inside Spain? I recently asked a poll. I should add the slide to this presentation. 90% of people didn't have the money in Spain. They show the funds outside of Spain. But in some provinces, they require some movements, some activity in the Spanish bank account, such is the case of Canary Islands. And also some people in Valencia province were required to do so. But it is not very consistent, okay? Most people just had most of their funds outside of Spain. And then after 5 years, you can apply for the long-term residence, also known as permanent residence, which is a much better residency type than the non-lucrative because it comes with a work permit and it has less stringent requirements. Now, let's talk about the renewal process update and the changes effective from May 20th, 2025. The renewal period remains at 2 years, okay? So you will get another period of 2 years instead of, there were rumors that it was going to change from 2 years to 4 years. This didn't happen. And there was an addition of 183-day minimum stay requirements for non-lucrative visa holders who want to renew, okay? This would sometimes align with Spanish tax residency rules. As we said, the immigration year and the tax year are counted differently. One is natural year and the other one is a calendar year, but they may overlap, okay? And many applicants, in order to comply with this minimum 193-day requirement, would also become tax residents, okay? Now, I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero about this, and she's extremely clear. This minimum stay requirement is not enforceable. You will not have to stay 193 days in Spain in order to renew your non-lucrative visa, because there's a Supreme Court ruling that already deleted the minimum stay requirement in the previous regulation and said that this requirement should be included in the law, in the main organic law 4/2000, and not in the regulation. The problem is the government doesn't have to go through so strict process to renew the regulation, but there is a strict process to renew the law. And the Supreme Court said that the minimum stay requirement has to be in the law, and they haven't changed the law. The law hasn't changed. The regulation of the law has changed. And this requirement is not enforceable. And I know Manero is absolutely positive and sure, and you can watch the videos on Spainguru's YouTube channel, saying that this is not an enforceable requirement. Let's talk about the financial requirements, and let's talk about how we calculate this for the renewal. Imagine that for a couple, you applied today in 2025, 36,000 euros minimum funding requirement. That means that for a renewal, if you're in a region that requires double the funds, you will need 72,000 euros. Now imagine that the first or the main applicant has an annual pension of 15,000 euros. How do you count this? Well, it's an annual pension and you're renewing for 2 years. So in 2 years, you will get 15,000 times 2. That means that you have already 30,000 euros and you are missing 42,000 euros, which you can show savings, for example, yes, and other types of passive income, okay? What about rental income? As I said, it is not a safe income. Many regions consider it not a safe income, although people I see that they're renewing also using rental income, okay? So it is quite erratic, okay? But if you have other kinds of income, don't only apply with the rental income, okay? Use it as a support income. Documentation requirements, ongoing private medical insurance coverage. This is very important. Avoid gaps in your coverage. And or public healthcare system coverage. For the first renewal, it is extremely unlikely that if you use the Convenio Especial, you will be on time to use the public healthcare system instead of a private health insurance. So normally you would overlap both for the first renewal. It takes weeks or even months to have effective access to the public healthcare system. You will have to show updated passport copies for both individuals. As I said, ongoing health coverage and no police records, also a big denial reason of the renewal. Many people driving under the influence in Spain, and that is a police record, and it could be a denial if you get it. Local town hall registration or empadronamiento. It is an hour requirement for the first renewal and ongoing renewals to show an empadronamiento for most regions, although someone published a first-hand experience on Spainguru in Granada saying that it wasn't required officially, but still, but try to get necessarily an empadronamiento for your renewal. Time you need to spend in Spain to maintain your residence, obtain a long-term residence or citizenship. For the NLB renewal, as we said, there is now a renewal requirement of a stay of minimum 183 days per natural year, not calendar year, per natural year, in order to renew the visa. But I know a Manero of Renewal says that it is not enforceable. It's not enforceable, okay? Because there is legal ambiguity because of a Supreme Court ruling that states that it needs to be included in the law and not in the regulation. Therefore, it needs to be deleted. In order to apply for the long-term residence, yes, you need to stay in Spain for at least 5 years. And you cannot be outside of Spain more than 10 months total in the previous 5 years in order to obtain it. Those 10 months don't have to be consecutive, but it cannot be longer than 6 months absence, okay? If I'm not wrong. And sometimes some people don't comply with this minimum stay requirement for the long-term residence, which has nothing to do with the minimum stay requirement of the non-lucrative visa renewal, which is not enforceable. The long-term residence minimum stay, it is enforceable and very strict, okay? Some people don't comply with it and apply for a third non-lucrative visa renewal, a so-called extraordinary renewal that not every region permits. For example, Galicia doesn't permit it. And then maybe they comply with the minimum stay requirements for the long-term residence, and then they apply for the long-term residence. If you plan to apply for the Spanish passport or nationality, if you're a holder of a temporary residence, like the non-lucrative visa, for example, dual passport holders from Latin American countries and other countries like Philippines can apply after only 2 years of legal residence in Spain. If you're a holder of temporary residency, you cannot be outside of Spain more than 3 months per year before applying for the Spanish passport. And if you're a holder of long-term residence, you cannot be outside of the European Union more than 1 year consecutively, or no more than 30 months in 5 years. And here's a few more slides about the Supreme Court ruling and what they've done in the past and what they will have to do in the present and future for people to renew their visas without complying with this, let's say, not legal 183 minimum stay requirements. Now let's talk about pathways to transition to work permit after 1 year of residence. So for example, you don't have to apply for the non-lucrative visa in order to get a work permit afterwards. You can apply for a work permit in Spain directly in a consulate, okay? If you have a job offer, or if you have your own, let's say, your own business plan that is approved, but they say it is much easier to do it once you have been a legal resident in Spain, and even you have gone through the first renewal, okay? So after 1 year of non-lucrative visa and renewal, then, excuse me, you can apply. I'm not saying it's going to be easy or automatic. No, you can apply for a work permit if you have your own business plan and it's approved, and you have a company who is ready to sponsor you and offer you a job offer. And potentially, if you were under a non-lucrative visa and you were working remotely for a non-Spanish company, and this, again, more support to the thesis that you can work remotely under a non-lucrative visa, there has been and there are successful transitions from non-lucrative visa to digital nomad visa, which require that you have been working at least 3 months before the submission of this modification, okay? I mentioned that in order to obtain the Spanish citizenship, well, there are different ways. Ancestry, if you get married, but by residence, normally you have the map there. The countries that are in gray, you have to be in Spain legally resident for at least 10 years in order to apply for the Spanish citizenship. Now, there is something called the fast-track nationality for the countries in red, Ibero-American nationals and other countries like Philippines, Portugal, Andorra, Guinea Equatorial, and Brazil, which is also an Ibero-American country. But those countries can apply, if you're a dual passport holder, can apply for the Spanish citizenship after only 2 years of legal residence. And this is especially interesting for people who, for example, hold also Mexican passport or, Puerto Rican citizenship. You get a Puerto Rican citizenship certificate, and that helps as well to access the 2-year pathway. Filipino nationals as well, etc. Right? And now finishing, and before going to the Q&A session, it's 1:30 p.m. now. Remember, you can use Spainguru for free. You can find free resources, weekly newsletter with top discussions, top most watched video of the week, YouTube channel for free, more than 900 videos, half of them are non-lucrative visa, blog posts, more than 1,700 articles, and of course, you can join the Facebook groups with a total aggregated members, 150,000 members community, with a dedicated, the largest out there Spanish non-lucrative visa Facebook group with more than 20,000 members, extremely active Facebook group that you can join today if you haven't done so yet. And if you need help with your visa application or with services that you will anyways, even if you do it yourself, you will need, like compliant health insurance, okay, medical certificates, sworn translation, apostille services in the UK and the US. All those services, you can find them on Spainguru, okay? And if you haven't lined up, if you haven't consulted with a tax advisor, I highly recommend you consult with an immigration expert and consult with a tax advisor at least 1 hour before making the decision of moving to Spain, so you know what your options are, and they can help you design your long-term strategy, not just go to an advisor and say, I want to apply for the non-lucrative visa, period. No. Try to also build a plan for the long term so that you are sure that that you can comply with all the different requirements along the way, and someone who knows their deal can help you with designing your specific long-term strategy in Spain. Bonus slide here. I asked people in the group, 128 votes. Did you work with a professional or did you do it yourself for the non-lucrative visa application? 50% said yes, 50% said no. And then I asked, for the people who used professional help, was it worth the investment? And this is for any help, not only Spainguru's partners, but anyone, okay? And 77% of people said it was worth the investment. So the vast majority of people said it was worth the investment, although 23% said, no, it was better maybe to apply for yourself. In any case, depending on your situation, I will recommend one thing or another. If it's an easy situation, straightforward, do it yourself. Why not? But if it's a bit complicated, you have some criminal record, your funds are not clear, you have living in different countries, etc., I highly recommend you going with professional help because it is a quite complex and time-sensitive process. Let's stay in touch. You can send me an email anytime at hello@spainguru.es. I always answer my emails. Facebook group, as I said, YouTube channel, newsletter. And remember, the content of this webinar is for information purposes only, and it's not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate's requirements. We're going to go through the Q&A session. But before that, I remind you, please, if you can help me out by leaving a nice review on Trustpilot, there's a red button there on top of the green bar that will redirect you to Trustpilot. It only takes less than 5 seconds of your time. If you can leave me a review, it would be super, super helpful. Thank you so much. And now let's go with the questions. First question, Janine. Thank you for joining today. Hi, I need to drop, but I will finish watching in the recording. Perfect. I have 2 questions. Do I need to have proof that my kid will be attending private school? Depends on the consulate. Many consulates list school enrollment requirements. Okay, for example, and even not only in Spain. Okay, and there are different ways to prove this. Maybe you can contact some school and they can send you some paper, etc. But also today, I was reading from this first-hand experience at Houston. They asked them for school enrollment in the US as well. So pretty weird, and it is very, very consulate sensitive. So you need to make sure that you comply with what your consulate is asking. And if they're asking crazy things, as I said, not only for this, but for rental contract, etc., maybe go with a lawyer, with a legal help that can make sense of the requirements that they ask you. Also, I read that you cannot have loans or mortgages when applying for a visa. Is that true? Depending on which lawyer you ask, they will tell you, no, you can have, no, they can't have, you cannot have. Many people applied with mortgages and they were accepted. Many people, okay? What lawyers would do, and this is an off-the-record answer, is that they will help you structure your accounts so that your mortgage doesn't show up, okay? Even if it's not strictly forbidden, it is best not to show it, okay? But for example, traditionally, Los Angeles consulate wasn't allowing mortgages and had it in their official requirements, like no mortgages allowed. They deleted that, okay? And now they should be accepting it, okay? Having a mortgage, as long as you provide and you comply with the financial requirements, okay? But definitely a mortgage it's a liability. So many officials will take it into account when they do, let's say, your the auditing of your financial requirements. I hope that this answered your question. Unfortunately, there's no absolute clear answer to that question. I wish I had it. Jessica, thank you for joining today and asking something. Is it possible for my husband and I to apply for the NLB at separate times, about 6 months apart? We have a joint savings account. We would both use to show funds. When my husband applies, he will also have his pension as funds. When I apply, I plan to use our joint savings accounts as proof of funds. If I understand correctly, as long as we have the IPREM for 2 main applicants. Well, if you apply as 2 main applicants, you're fine. The question is if you want to apply as a couple, right? So, yeah, two IPREMs as of 2025. The minimum is 28,800 euros times 2 is 57,600 euros in 2025. It can increase later on, right? So if you apply as 2 different applicants, as I understand, this is not legal advice, you can apply whenever you want. It doesn't matter because you are 2 main applicants. The thing is, if you apply as a couple, you will benefit from lower funding, or financial requirements. So yeah, I don't see any problem to applying in different moments if you do it as 2 main applicants. The thing is that the question that we have is, could you apply as a couple today and your husband as a dependent? Why not? No, if you comply with the financial requirements, which should be lower, which is 36,000 euros, why not applying today as a couple? If I understand well, maybe your husband is working now and wants to wait, something like that. I don't know very well, but yeah, definitely maybe investing in a 1-hour consultation with an immigration expert you can find on Spainguru.es can help you build a proper timeline, a strategy, so that you do properly everything and you don't make any costly mistakes. Now let's go with the next one. Horace, I hope I'm pronouncing well. Thank you for joining today. I live in the UK, 30 kilometers from Manchester, so they will be my consulate. You mentioned Manchester earlier being crazy. In what way? What issues should I be aware with regards to Manchester? Well, first of all, that crazy requirement about the medical certificate issued by a Spanish doctor. On Spainguru.es, you can use a UK doctor certificate with a discount. In fact, you go to Spainguru, or you can use a Spanish doctor. The Manchester consulate is famous because they rejected a few visas last year because they were requiring that if you use a Spanish doctor, that you are physically present in Spain at the time of issuance of your certificate. That is one of the crazy interpretations of Manchester that not many other consulates have, okay? Another thing about Manchester is that they require P45s. They're very adamant about these requirements. That's what I heard. and they're not very lenient to giving you the option to keep your passport when you apply for the visa. So they're a little bit closed compared to other consulates. For example, London and Edinburgh are not like this in terms of the medical certificate issued by a Spanish doctor, just to give you an example. Now let's go with the next one. What is an apostille? That's a great question. An apostille, there is a convention called the Hague Convention, I think from 1967, that many countries joined, including the UK, US, Canada last year, Spain, many other countries, that they decided to establish a network for the certification of official documents so that a foreign document could be used at a local procedure. So, for example, the procedure is the non-lucrative visa procedure at a Spanish consulate. You want to show a UK ACRO police check. That ACRO police check is not a Spanish document. How do the authorities understand that it is a real official document? Well, thanks to the apostille. You will apostille your ACRO certificate, okay, and that apostille says that that document is real, it is true, the person who signs it is real, is true, and it is valid for the application of, in this case, a non-lucrative visa at a Spanish consulate. I hope that. So it is a way to certify the document or legalizing it, okay? Christina, thank you for joining today. For the NLV documentation, can you submit the address of a trusted friend or relative in Spain? Depending on the consulate. Depending on the consulate. Honest. In fact, some consulates are a bit strict about it, but if it is, I've seen many people, for example, in UK consulates, many people who have friends in Spain already living in Spain, they use the address of their friends and they're being widely accepted. But in some consulates in the US, they can be a bit strict about this. Okay, so that is my answer. The best is to go to the Spanish non-lucrative visa Facebook group and ask the community for your specific consulate, and also read about first-hand experiences, and of course, check the official requirements in English and Spanish from the consulate and BLS office. Horace, what if you have retired and do not have an income anymore? Just savings. Do you get tax on savings? It is a very tricky question. So, in Spain, you can get tax on your savings, okay, depending how much they are, how much your net worth is. So, first of all, for the income, as what refers to income, you don't get tax on your savings. You get tax on the interest generated on your income, on your savings, sorry. So the interest that you get from your savings is an income. You will pay taxes on that income. But also Spain is one of the few countries in the world that has a wealth tax and a solidarity tax, which is another type of wealth tax. And that tax is applied depending on the net value of your assets, including savings and rights. Okay, so if you, for example, have a net worth of 3 million euros, you will already either kick in a wealth tax in a specific region or a solidarity tax at the nation level. But, you know, the threshold for the wealth tax and the solidarity tax are pretty high. And if you move to Madrid or Andalusia, you don't have wealth tax, let's say, long story short, and you will have only the solidarity tax kicking in at 3 million euros. But for example, in Catalonia, the wealth tax kicks in at 500,000 euros net value of your assets, okay, including savings, right? So it's a pretty long answer for a short question. Oh, this is, sorry, this question was already asked. And that was the last question that I see. Oh, I see. Right, sorry, I missed one question. Here. One question myself. I stopped working end of January 2025. Congratulations. I am 59 in September. Oh, my birthday is also in September. I have no plans in working again. I am really enjoying the relaxation. I plan to start taking some money from my pension shortly when I get around to it. Would that make me a retiree with regards to the S1 form, or is it age restricted too? Example given, do I need to be 67 to be classed as a retiree? That's a question I don't know the answer to, unfortunately, because those are the rules from the UK. And I haven't heard this question being asked before. maybe it could be great if you could join the group and ask the question. You can also do it anonymously if you don't want your name to be shown up when you ask your question, and maybe hear the answers from other UK retirees in your situation. But unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question. I wish I knew. For what it is regarding the non-lucrative visa application, there is no age limit. Okay, you can be any age to apply for the non-lucrative visa. Okay, you can be 20, you can be 30, you can be 80. There's no limits. Okay. But for the S1 form, I don't know exactly what are the rules in order to be eligible for the S1 form. Okay. In any case, of course, this doesn't answer your question, but you can always hire an NLV compliant health insurance to apply for your non-lucrative visa. That would be another pathway, let's say. All right. So good. I will join the group. Perfect. Thank you very much. There are no more questions, and it's almost 2 p.m. Time to have lunch here in Spain. And I really appreciate that you joined today. I will be sending you the recording soon to your emails, and it's going to be published on Spainguru's YouTube channel soon. And I really appreciate that you made your time to join today. If you have a few seconds and you can leave a Trustpilot review, I will be extremely thankful for it. And you can always reach me out at hello@spainguru.yes. If you missed any question or you have any comment, I'm very, very happy to chat with you and maybe point you in the right direction. Thank you so much for joining today again, and let's stay in touch. Goodbye.